the last important point that I wanted to discuss in terms of cost of globalization is what we are experiencing today. Okay, global pandemics. Why this is linked to globalization? Where it is linked, of course, because global pandemics have always existed, but in recent years they have become more and more frequent for one simple reason: that people are traveling a lot around the world, and pandemics they spread through viruses, and viruses spread through people. So if people moves around the world, this of course makes pandemics more and more frequent over time. This is a nice graph that shows you all the main pandemics we had in the world history, starting from the Antonin Plague very early in the 165. As you can see, of course, the size of the size of this picture shows you how many people died. So just to give you an idea, the Black Death, which was during the 1300, was a pandemic during which there were more than 200 million people who died. So this was a very huge impact. It has a very huge impact on societies. But what I would like you to focus is not really the size of these balls, which is the relevance in terms of death of the pandemics, but rather the frequency. Okay, if you go down here and focus on the last 10 years, 20 years from 2000, you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pandemics in just 20 years. Whereas later on, if you go back in history, there was one pandemic every 100 years or 50 years. Okay, so recently we had a very large diffusion of pandemics, and we are experiencing one nowadays, which is of course another crucial cost that needs to be associated with the spread of globalization. So this, of course, as I said, creates tension. Around the world there are demonstrations against or pro-globalization. What I would like to do in this course is basically to discuss. So this, of course, this demonstration, this and all I said so far suggests that there is nowadays a huge debate about globalization. Okay, in particular, the discussion over globalization, whether it is good or it is bad, has moved from the streets, so from people protesting or demonstrating, to the columns or financial presses, as well as into the academic research. Okay, there are lots of people, economists, doing research about globalization, trying to understand the positive effects, the negative effects, and the ways, the policies that you should implement to improve the positive effects and contain or reduce the costs. In particular, if you map over time, there was full support to globalization during the 1990s and 2000s. This was the heydays of globalization. Lots of people were focusing on the benefits of it in terms of growth of the GDP, in terms of diffusions of knowledge, diffusions of science, and things like that. Very few people were discussing the costs. Nowadays, however, the costs are becoming clearer. So one question that people are asking is whether we could witness a breakdown of globalization in the years to come, which are the years in which you, at least I hope, you will enter the job market. So it is also important for you to have to start from now to understand the kind of world in which you will live when you will stop your honeymoon being a student, and you will start to work in the real world. There were breakdown in globalization. One was the collapse of the gold standard in the 1914. So it is certainly possible that it will happen again in the future. Of course, I started from a very broad discussion. In this course, we will not be discussing everything. So it will not be a discussion about globalization in general, but it will focus on two main subjects. And from now, I will start to enter into the detail of how I would like to organize the course. So this course focuses on two main subjects. The first one is one of the main drivers of globalization, which is multinational companies. Okay, so one subject of our analysis in this second part of the course will be companies, and in particular, multinational companies. Another subject of the discussion, which was not there last year, for obvious reason, but I decided to introduce it this year because I think it is important for you to have a better idea of what is going on around you at this moment, is a discussion of one of the consequences of globalization, and in particular, global pandemics. Okay, so we will have some discussion also about, of course, we will focus mainly on economic issues related with the COVID-19 pandemics, but I would like, rather than, as I did last year, giving you standard case studies about multinational companies, those students who did the course last year, and there might be some of them connected to the class today, knows these were very standard case studies. By the way, I uploaded them in the LE page. If you are interested, you can have a look at them. They are in the part associated with, there is a folder called something like case studies about multinational companies or something like that. So the case studies are there, but this year I think I would like, in particular, you to, rather than focusing on those case studies, to focus on the other papers that I will discuss with you in a few seconds. Which, as I said, are concerned with the global pandemic related to COVID-19. So, my lectures will deal with subject 1. So, my classes will deal with multinational companies. Students' presentation will deal with point 2, basically the consequence of globalization in terms of the COVID-19 pandemics. In particular, the main objective of my lectures will be to answer one main question, which is what a multinational company is. Sorry, three main questions. First, what is the multinational company? Secondly, why multinational company exists, which is not a trivial question as it might seem. And third, what are the effects of multinational company operations? And as you will see, for the third part, for these third questions, we will discuss some of the issues, in particular the impacts on labor, the impacts on innovation that I was referring to somehow in my introduction. Students' presentations, instead, as I said, this year will be focused on papers that study the economic aspects of the COVID pandemics, and have two main objectives, which are improving our understanding of global pandemics, somehow, as a consequence of globalization, and secondly, discuss their potential effects and possible solution, in particular, potential economic effects and possible solution. Let me notice that, of course, the papers that I will ask you to discuss in your presentations that I have already uploaded in the folder that is called, in the LE page, Reading Materials for Students' Presentations, are clearly papers that came out this month. Okay, so we will study them together. Okay, I've read them. I didn't study them. So I think it would be also interesting to have a discussion about them all together, because these are very nice works, very properly done in terms of methodology, in terms of analysis, that have been done in these days, and that are, of course, new both to me and to you. So it will be somehow a sort of like cooperative efforts that we will try to do together to understand what this paper have to tell about the situations in which we live, physically live nowadays.